Hey, this is Dan from MusicXplorer. We're here today with Tom Guerra. He's a musician and a writer. He's been in bands such as the Mambo Sons, the Dirty Bones Band, the Delrays, and he's also released 2 solo albums. He's worked with many musicians, including Morgan Fisher from Mott the Hoople, Dan Baird from the Georgia Satellites, Rick Derringer, and Johnny Winter, just to name a few. He was profiled in Guitar Player magazine in 1991 and is currently a writer for music magazines such as Vintage Guitar and ToneQuest. So I guess let's start off with how did you get to being a guitar player? How did you start in the music world? And how did it start for you?
Well, I always have been a music fan and was lucky enough to grow up at a time where my parents were young in the 60s and started initially learned how to play bass, and but also at that point started learning guitar as well. And that was pretty much in that first year I started hooked up with a band and started gigging right off the bat.
So you were in the Dirty Bones Band. That was not your first band?
That wasn't my first band, but that was the first band that sort of played regionally, and we kind of had a following. These people called themselves Boneheads, and that was a great experience. So
back to your music. So you 3 albums with the 4 albums with Dirty Bones Band?
It was 3, and then there was a live album that we did, And it got to the point where it's like we were kids that grew up together, and we all started to get married and remarried again and that type of thing, So people grew up and moved away, and it was kind of when music was shifting away from like hard rock and roll to sort of the grunge thing, and we're like, that train's already left the gate, and we were all pretty spent.
So then you formed the Mambo Sons.
Well, before that, for most of the 90s, I played in a blues band called the Delrays. One night we were playing an opening for Ronnie Earl, a great guitar player, and who's sitting in front of me watching me play slide guitar, but J-Mo from the Ohlman Brothers. And I was like, He grew up with Dwayne as the slide player in his band. So after the show, we talked, and he was very encouraging, and we played together a couple times after that as well. So I played from the pretty much the entire 90s with the Delrays, and then in 1998, I had been writing a lot of songs and wanted to have Scott Lawson Pomeroy sing them because he was my favorite singer that I had worked with up until that point. And he and I started collaborating on the songs, and then Rick Derringer joined us for the first Mambo Sons album, which was 1999. And Kenny Aronson was on that. Kenny and I first met then, and he's been a steady in my musical career ever since.
How did Rick Derringer come into play?
I was on a local radio station promoting a gig that I had for the Delrays. I got a call saying, "Hey, I really like the guitar playing on that song." I said, "Oh, thanks. Do you play?" He goes, "Yeah, this is Rick Derringer." So I said, "Let me get your number. I'll call you after this, And I called him and I said, "Hey, I'm doing this new album." I said, "You want to maybe guest or help us produce or something?" He's like, "Sure." So he came, he gave me a lot of production tips, and great guitar player, great guy, totally had his act together too, which was really nice to see. The last album we did was in 2009. It was a double album called Heavy Days. I wanted to do some solo gigs and some solo music.
And then you worked on you decided, and so what got you moving on your own solo records? How did
I'd always
wanted to do all along anyway, right?
Well, yes and no. I always was a guitar player, and I always was really, really serious about that. And I always was serious for with my songwriting too. But then one day I woke up really trying to work within the limitations of my voice and write for my voice, and started doing that around 2012. And I think 2014 was when my first solo album came out, and that was called All of the Above. And that did a lot better than I expected. My goal was, to do that, and if it got a good response, to do a second one, and then maybe see where it took me, And
so you've got your latest album CD,
Yep.
Sudden Signs of Grace, out this year, and you released the latest single, Sudden Signs of Grace. So tell us the background on that one. I mean, I think you got Morgan Fisher again on that album too, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah, Morgan Fisher is a good friend of mine. That he was the keyboard player in Mott the Hoople, it's an honor to have him as a guest on my record player. But for whatever reason, I started playing a lot of acoustic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to me, the Sudden Signs of Grace, it just has a Caribbean feel to me.
Yeah, well, that's the title track. Somebody said it did sound like something, Paul Simon would do or whatever, a Caribbean feel. And we just did a video for that. I think it came out last week, actually, where we got a whole bunch of guest stars on it. My friend Jack Sani from Dire Straits and Christine Ohlman from the Saturday Night Live band, G.E. Smith, who's played with everybody. Morgan Fisher's on that. Dan Baird of the Georgia Satellites is on it. Alvin Youngblood Hart. I can't even think of half the people, but they all have been really supportive of my music. And John Butcher is a great friend of mine, and he's a great, like a Renaissance man. He's a wicked, incredible video producer, besides being a great guitar player, singer, songwriter. So he and I started working on some videos for Sudden Signs of Grace, some of the songs from that,
So, other than playing in bands and playing guitar, what have you done with your musical career besides playing music?
Well, for the past, I think it's 22 years now, I've written for Vintage Guitar Magazine and a couple other magazines as well, guitar-based magazines. And one of my favorite guitar players is Paul Kossoff from Free. And obviously can't interview him because he's dead, but I'd like to do a biography on him. So I did this big piece on Paul Kossoff, and that really was one of their better received interviews. They put that online now, and it's one of their most popular interviews. And I just, from that point on, I started writing for them on a regular basis. And then over probably the past 10 years or so, they've asked me to do gear reviews too. So I've been doing that. In some ways, it's helped my own musical footprint because I think people might recognize me from the magazine and say, well, what's this guy's music about? So that's helped out as well.
That's really cool. So I just want to back up a little bit more. I mean, you're a profiled guitar player in 1991. How did that come about?
That was another kind of happy accident. I was in a music store, and this was when I was with the Dirty Bones band, and I was in there playing some stuff, and a guy's like, hey, I just submitted a demo to Guitar Player. You should do it too. This is really good stuff. I put a demo together and sent it in. Totally forgot about it. In, I think, of February of that year, I got a call out of the blue, picked up the phone in my kitchen. It was like, hey, Tom, this is Jazz Obrecht. I'm the editor of Guitar Player magazine. Loved your demo. Want to put you in the spotlight. I said, that's great, man. It was in the edition, which was awesome, that had Stevie Ray and his brother on the cover. It was a Stevie Ray tribute edition. One of the coolest things that happened to me in terms of my writing was I got a call one night from a British guy. I said, is this Tom? And I said, yes. He said, this is Andy Fraser, who's the bass player of Free. And what had happened right before this was there were all these internet rumors that Andy Fraser was at death's door of AIDS. And he's like, I really enjoyed the piece you did on Paul Kossoff. He's like, I want to tell you my story. So he picked Vintage Guitar Magazine to be his vehicle to basically tell his story. And his story was, he was coming out of the closet. He was a gay man. He was living with AIDS. He had contracted AIDS. He was healthy as a horse. I mean, he was in perfect shape. But that was probably the biggest, most touching thing that's ever happened to me in terms of that, because he kind of, and I'm the biggest Free fan in the world, and I think Andy was probably one of the greatest bass players, and we got to tell his story, and that was incredible. He's a gentleman. Love the guy.
Glad you chatted with me today. And
let me know if you have any other questions or whatever. And I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you giving my music some visibility as well.